We're looking at The Weatherman. The Weatherman was a specialized package of films that was franchised to TV stations in about 1957, we're thinking. My name's Dave Kirwan. I'm an illustrator and a designer and a cartoon geek. And we're going to take a few minutes to look at a sampling of these remarkable films, these very short little films. Basically, the way the package worked is the station would receive dozens of these little short films, each detailing some specific weather condition. Actually, we believe there were 3 different films for each very, very specific weather condition. And they were 3 varying lengths. And as you can tell by these samples, the difference in lengths of the different little versions, the 3 different lengths, was basically padding. The longest version had a little intro. We think there were as many as 8 little intros. And each one of these 8 intros, they had slightly different lyrics, as you can tell, too, and of course different animation. The idea is the local TV station could drop these into their little news broadcasts. They wouldn't have to cut to the weatherman, and maybe this little animated weatherman would augment the live action weatherman. But again, this is pretty early in the game. This is even before the 60s. And most local newscasts were very brief. Network news shows were still 15 minutes, well into the 1960s. So chances are there wasn't that much to say about the weather. There certainly weren't a lot of elaborate graphics as we see now posted on maps and such. There may have been a few little graphics posted onto a map or something like that. These little films were designed to be injected into programming, and for all we know, maybe were used in just plain general interest programming, not necessarily just news broadcasts. This package was produced at Soundac, which was a Miami, Florida studio, most famous today as the home of Colonel Bleep, the first color cartoon series produced directly for television. Folks like Jerry Beck and other cartoon historians have identified the key creative people involved at Soundac at this time. Jack Schley was the creative head of the studio. The character, this wonderful little character, it looks kind of like a teepee with a weather vane on top there, was probably designed by Fran Noak, and who also did much of the animation along with Hal Lockwood. Hal Lockwood is a name that's probably more familiar to a lot of old comic book buffs. I just love the design. I mean, you can't get much more super 50s modern than this little guy. I'm just amazed at how resourceful these people were. Obviously, these things were filmed on a tiny budget with a very lean crew, and yet they have a vitality and a real punch, not in spite of their limitations, but because of their limitations. They jump from pose to pose. We've got that great reaction technique. And you see these in the Colonel Bleep cartoons too, where they just alternate between 2 extreme poses and get those little eyeballs flashing back and forth. I mean, just terrific. And the gags. How in the world do they come up with a gag, a genuinely amusing idea for things as arcane as light drizzle followed by fog? Don't know how successful this series was. We're guessing not very. The films themselves are pretty rare. Not many copies surfaced until fairly recently. And when they do show up, they tend to have not that much wear. We don't really have such optimistic expectations for the original artwork for this, or for that matter, Colonel Bleep. The story goes that all of the original artwork from the studio was packed up in a truck that was stolen back in the 70s. Kind of makes the actual films all the more precious. And what a wonderful, wonderful souvenir, a memento of the era they are. They're just terrific little gems. I just love them. I think they're great.